There is a small but tangible link between Earth, Fire and Water and the play of Henry V, which we'll be talking about for the most part. Which, if those of you who are scrabbling through your memory banks to see if you can remember a single word of Henry V, don't worry. All you need to know will be revealed in a second. I hope through a cunning map story of the play that we've been developing to work with primarily in business, but also in some personal development workshops. And it comes out of really, the work comes out of a kind of synthesis that I've been working towards of using theatre as an educational tool, mythology, psychology, and mythology. So we're kind of using story-based learning, which a different way of saying indirect learning, experiential learning. So we invite people in the 2-day courses for businessmen to come and live in different ways through the story of Henry V in order to explore issues of ethical leadership. And so if there was a title for my talk this evening, I would probably call it How to Make a Difference. And that is what I hope you will get a little insight into. So I'd like to start, because I don't just quote Shakespeare, with a quote from someone whose name may be familiar to some of you around here, an Indian spiritual leader called Rabindranath Tagore. And he wrote these words: "I slept and dreamt that life was joy. And then I awoke and realized that life was duty. But then I went to work, and lo and behold, I discovered that duty can be joy." I discovered that duty can be joy. One of the reasons I'm involved in this work now with businessmen, I've worked in the field of men's development now for 12 years. And after a few years of that, I was getting seriously concerned about what appeared to be happening in the world of work that was sending so many men to the edge of their sanity with what it was proposing as being a meaningful life. And since then I've been inspired and I've been attempting in different ways to look at what constitutes meaning and what constitutes meaning at work. And when I came across the play, I had the privilege of being invited to direct Henry V for the opening season of the Shakespeare's Globe Theatre in London 3 years ago, and ended up doing about a year of research before we started rehearsals. And one of those research projects involved working with a group of public service leaders and managers from health authorities, police, education, local government, and so on. And we basically played with them for 2 days with the play. And our express intention was to pick their brains for good ideas and resonances about leadership. In other words, what was it that they, as modern-day leaders, were having to face in their lives, and did that have anything to do with the play of Henry V at all? And could we find some links between modern leadership issues? Well, luckily enough, we stumbled across a few, and at the end of those 2 days, they came to us and said, well, we've learned more from Henry V in the last 2 days than we have on any management course we've been in the last 10 years. And at that time, there wasn't a lot we could do with it because we were just about to head into rehearsal. But that was something that stuck with me, and we've been working and pursuing those ideas in much more detail with various groups and management institutes around this country and elsewhere. And the idea behind this, the kind of as if, the thing I'm going to ask you to imagine for the next period of time, is that Shakespeare was attempting to write the myth of a great leader when he wrote Henry V. And at that time in 1600, you couldn't stand up in Hyde Park Corner and say, I think the Queen is barking mad, because you've had your head chopped off. But you could write a play about a mad king or a good king or a mad queen or a good queen, put it on the theatre, and everyone would come and look at it and say, oh, how interesting, wouldn't it be nice if our king or queen was a bit more like that? So the theatre was the combination for us today of video, television, radio, mass media, email, and all the rest of it. It was the only place where people went to learn and where information could generally be imparted to people unless you went to a very high kind of scholastic level of learning in the ivory towers at the time. So I believe that Shakespeare was trying to put wisdom into the world through his plays, and the wisdom that we have attempted to decode from Henry V follows a kind of archetypal pattern of what I call Henry's journey, or leader's journey, which I will talk you through if there are some people at the back who can't see this. The play starts with a call to the imagination, famous chorus, which I may inflict a little bit on you in a moment, "Oh, for a muse of fire," which is really saying, Shakespeare saying to the audience, we can't do this alone. If we're going to create a work of art, this has to be something that is between us. It cannot exist, we cannot do it to you. We are asking you to get involved so that we do this together. When the actual play starts, we see two archbishops talking about Henry V and about his apparently miraculous reformation from being a rather dangerous and drunken lout of a youth, hanging around pubs with a funny fat guy called Falstaff, who some of you may know from the Henry IV plays, and creating loads of mischief. And everyone had completely written him off and thought that as soon as Henry IV died and he, as Henry V, came to the throne, the country would go to the dogs. That was it, basically. He couldn't make the grade. He wasn't a leader, wasn't leadership potential, and everyone would be suffering soon. However, somewhere along the way, and these archbishops don't know how it happened, he has managed to engage in some kind of study, and having assumed the throne, he has become a changed person. He has stepped into his leadership role with apparent vigor and readiness and some inspiration that has kind of taken everyone by surprise, and they're now looking forward to seeing how he will take them forward. And so they are, in that sense, what I call assessing the past. And so as we move through this journey now, we'll be inviting you to think of it also as the journey of any great project. And any new beginning has to start with assessing the past. And this would be the same for an inner journey and an outer journey. So you don't know where you want to go until you know where you've been and where you are now. And that's kind of where they start the play. And having assessed the past, they then move into a council meeting where Henry indeed proposes his vision for the future. And his vision for the future, at this point, I'm going to interpret in a specific way, because it is about reclaiming the territory of France as part of what he believed at that time, and his archbishops believed should be a joint kingdom. So I'm inviting you not to think of it as an aggressive takeover bid, but as an attempted merger of associated interests. France had belonged to England 100 years before and had been lost through various mismanagement, internal strife, and civil wars. And so in this play, and it's very specific at the beginning, he will not make this claim unless he believes he has a legal right. And one of the legal rights he's asserting, by the way, is the right to inherit through the feminine, which the French are attempting to deny on the one hand, and also their king is claiming his right to inherit through the feminine. So there are several arguments at stake, which we won't go into now. But what I would like to invite you again to imagine for the next little while is that this is a vision of a future, of a positive future that he's moving towards. By incorporating these two great territories into one, both can become more fruitful. And this is his vision, to go to France, and the rest of the act is spent determining how they're going to do that, and particularly what resources they're going to allocate to achieving this vision. And they manage to do that. They end up deciding that 25% of their people will be, of their available manpower, will be allocated to France, and 75% will be managing the existing territory. So as we move then into Act 2, they're attempting to figure out how this is going to take place in practice. And as soon as they begin to actually put this vision into action on the ground, we come up against these figures called the traitors. And Henry has to deal with his first potentially disastrous engagement, which is how to survive being stabbed in the back before he started. And I would suggest that many of us with visions, projects, and missions in our lives know exactly how he feels. So he manages to deal with the traitors in time-honored way. Being a king, he's able to send them to the tower, but not without some redress and making clear that he is doing this for the sake of his country, not out of personal sense of hurt and revenge, which is an important distinction that people in leadership positions, I believe, need to make. And he does deal with them effectively. He moves on to Act 3, which is taking his first steps. And in the first steps, it's like he's found the vision of France, and then the important thing in any project is to pinpoint that first step, that first foothold that will make a difference towards achieving that goal. And this becomes a little town of Harfleur, and they sail off across the channel to Harfleur. But almost inevitably, when one's great ideas that you've had, whether it's up in the office or up in the bedroom, hit the ground, they run up against some blocks, and it doesn't go quite as smoothly in action as it did when you were thinking about it. So he gets stuck at his first blocks. And indeed, he's had this vision, this small town of Harfleur should take a week to get through, and then he'd be in Paris by Christmas, and 3 months later, he's still stuck around Harfleur, by which time he's lost 20% of his forces. They've been living in marshes for 3 months, out in the wet and the cold. Some of the participants on the course we're running at the moment may have some associations with that. But he's been spending quite a lot of time outside, and people are depressed and demoralized and demotivated. And his real task, his first real leadership challenge then, becomes how to manage his own demoralization and that of his troops simultaneously, and to take them through this first hurdle into a potentially successful campaign. This he does mainly through speech. The power of image, the power of words he uses as his main weapon throughout. And one thing that he does as a successful leader, and I would suggest as anyone who is holding a vision and is trying to put a vision into action, he paints pictures with words. He paints pictures of the future in words. He creates pictures in people's minds of what if. If we did this, what would that look like? And he does that basically effectively enough that people buy that vision and say, what do I need to do to get there? And he manages that throughout Act 3. He manages to do that positively with his troops who are demotivated at the time. He manages to do that apparently negatively with the governor of Harfleur, who is his opposite number in Harfleur, the opposing governor. And he does that by giving him such a negative picture of the future, if he doesn't give in now, that he gives in now. And sometimes we also have to paint negative pictures. If we believe in our vision, something or someone is in our way, we have to really lay on the line why, if we continue in this particular way, it will be doom and gloom. And again, he paints that picture so effectively, he changes that future. He stops that future happening. But having survived and got through that first block, he then is wise enough to make a tactical decision on the ground, a tactical retreat. He's not just going to stick to his original battle plan and try and muscle on through to Paris by Christmas, because he recognizes that his resources have been worn down, his troops are tired and demoralized, and they need a break. So he has a choice. He could push on, he could retreat to England, or he could find a middle way. And this he does. There were certain territories at that time in France that were still English, including the port of Calais, and he decides on a tactical withdrawal to Calais, which is kind of going across rather than back, in which he's going to rest up over Christmas, get some more resources, and then replan, re-strategize in the new year. However, the French have now got other ideas. So having been, they've actually spent 3 months arguing about who's going to lead the counterattack, because they're still a feudal society. They didn't have the kind of chain of command that Harry did in England. They've finally mustered their forces under the Lord of Orleans? No, the Lord Constable of France. And they are now descending on Henry's battered 8,000 troops with 40,000 fresh French troops. And they're chasing each other. The French surround Henry on a field called Agincourt. At which point, Henry enters into what I call very cheerily his dark night of the soul. So at this point, they're surrounded by a vastly superior force. He has very few options available to him. He is told that he can surrender and pay a huge ransom, and his troops' lives will be saved. But if he chooses to fight, basically, they will all be killed. And he, as a leader, as someone holding this vision, goes into his dark night of the soul. And again, in my experience working with people in business and out, holding visions, moving projects forward, there is always a dark night in the soul in any meaningful project. I'm afraid it comes with the territory. And this is the point of intense self-doubt, doubt of self, doubt of others, doubt of meaning, doubt of the project or the vision itself. And through a very specific process that Shakespeare manages to intuit, Henry manages to find his way through the dark night. It involves taking some time for himself. It involves listening to certain other people very carefully. It involves a kind of period of internal introspection, confession even in his case, to clear the stuff that has surrounded him from being involved in the project. And when he does that, when he gets through that, he gets to what I would call his core values, or his core beliefs. He kind of strips away, like an onion, unpeeling bits of himself, literally takes off the crown, takes off the role of being a king, finds the time to look at what am I really doing this for? And this is the connection I said with Henry as an inspirational leader. An inspirational leader needs to be in the service of something beyond himself. And if you ain't figured it out before, you have to figure it out in the dark night, or you won't go on. And those questions are around this idea of what am I in the service of? What gives me the right to lead these people? And very specifically, in his case, what gives me the right to lead these people into danger? And is my vision worth it? Can I ask people to sacrifice for my vision? What gives me the right to do that? And he really has to go in to figure that out. He manages it through this little process and comes out able to inspire the troops with the speech some of you may have heard of, the St. Crispin's Day speech, when he manages to turn a whole army round again from depression to inspiration. And they go off and they fight the battle and they win. Against all the odds, they win. The part luck, part strategy. Strategy, apparently, I met someone from Sandhurst who said, oh yes, we were taught the strategy of Agincourt, which some people find quite alarming. But anyway, so he manages this, and he does inspire the troops. Some of you may have seen the film Shakespeare in Love over the last year. You'll probably remember that the audiences generally liked seeing fights on the stage, not just the actors knocking each other about, but sometimes as characters as well. But in this play of Henry V, there is no scripted fight. This huge famous Battle of Agincourt, no fight scripted on stage. And again, me and Mark Rylance, who's playing Henry at the time, the artistic director of the Globe, were figuring out what does this mean? I mean, obviously we could stage a fight, but Shakespeare hasn't actually written one in. Why might that be? For us, again, going back to this idea of Henry's journey, the myth of a great leader, we thought maybe what Shakespeare's trying to say is that the leader's battle is to inspire the troops. That's the leader's battle. The leader's battle is to deal with the demons in the dark night of the soul. And if you win that battle, the rest takes care of itself. And so that's how we ended up playing it, without not creating any great battles. And that's what Henry does. He does inspire the troops, and they do win the battle. And they achieve as much of the vision as is attainable at that time, which is partly survival, partly a foothold in the territory they're attempting to claim. And then Act 5 is a very different act, completely different mood. It's peace negotiations. It actually takes place 10 years later. In the play, you probably think it was 1 or 2. And they are now negotiating a marriage between King Henry and Princess Catherine. And what we learn kind of symbolically, metaphorically through that act is that basically Henry needs to change his style. Whatever it is that he has been leading with so far ain't going to cut it anymore. If he goes on aggressing this country, they're never going to be peaceful and be able to live in harmony. He is told in no uncertain terms by a guy called the Duke of Burgundy, who's the peacemaker, it is his job to turn the battlefield into a garden. And that as a leader, it is not only a duty, but a sacred responsibility to turn a battlefield into a garden. There's no going out and winning some new territory if you don't look after it. There's no point laying claim to a certain group or moving into a certain community if you don't intend to look after it. And he basically says at one point he's attempting to woo the Princess of Catherine, and he says, I was born with an aspect of armor that when I come to woo ladies, I fright them. And he basically can't make her fall in love with him. And basically what I would say is he's stuck in the warrior mode. He's a terrific warrior, he can't take the armor off. And his last commitment that he makes right at the end of the play, Duke of Burgundy comes back in and says, if you wish to move into this different mode, you might call it the lover mode, you're going to have to learn patience, take time, move into a garden. So his last job as a king in the play, his last commitment he makes is to take the armor off and find the time to develop some other sides of himself. So again, the end of every project, there is the need to look after ourselves, look after the people who have been on the front line, and literally turn the battlefield back into a garden. So that's our little thumbnail version through the play of the kind of basic things that we would point out and draw conclusions from over the 2 days. So what I'll do now is just kind of recover some of that territory with a little bit more poetry and give you another kind of take on it. So the play, as I said, starts with the first chorus, the call to the imagination. And the imagination, in this sense, for me, is very connected to vision. The imagination and vision tend to come from the same place. And it was Einstein said, imagination is more important than knowledge. Because while knowledge points to all there is, imagination points to all there will be. Imagination points to all there will be. So anyone starting a project, anyone in a position of leadership responsibility, whether it's in family, community, small business, or multinational, needs to get in touch with the imagination. And typically, many people at work, in certain working environments, the imagination is on the first thing that goes. So one of the things we're doing at Cranfield now is trying to re-stimulate the use of imagination in work. So that when the chorus comes on, he talks about this use of the imagination. He says, what's it for? He asks for it in very specific terms. He says, oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention, a kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the appearance of Mars, and at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire seek for employment. But pardon, gentles all, the flat, unraised spirits that have dared on this unworthy scaffold to raise so great an object. And he goes on to say, we cannot do this, and that's where he asks for the help with the imagination. So the imagination is the bit that allows something to be co-created, whether it's between actors and audience, whether it's between leader and followers, or leaders and co-leaders in different areas. The act of engaging in a mutual game of the imagination is where vision can come from. Well, I was working with a wonderful lady the other day called Dana Zohar, who's writing a book on spiritual intelligence for leadership. And she has worked with one guy who was who went through his dark night. He was one of the senior directors of McDonald's in Sweden. And he suddenly woke up one morning and he said, "This is bollocks." He said, "I'm being part of polluting the world. I don't think I can live with this." And he went to Dana and he said, I'm having real trouble. I don't know what to do. I've got family to support. I don't know what to do. Back and forth. And Dana, there was in her consultant capacity, said, well, basically you've got three choices. You can quit, obviously. You can go and form a consultancy that promotes environmental issues, you know, and do something. Or you can stay where you are and make a difference. And you decide what you want to do. He went back, had a good dark night, came out and said, I want to stay and make a difference. That was about 2 years ago. He's now been promoted. He's now in the head office in Chicago. He's in charge now of a worldwide campaign to make all hamburger boxes biodegradable. They're making them out of potato products. It's a multi-million campaign. They've built new factories to try and manage this product. He's made a difference. Whether we end up supporting McDonald's or not, in a sense, for me, isn't the issue. The issue is he took a core belief and made a difference. And hopefully will go on making a difference in the ways that he can. And he wrote, as part of that process of coming through his dark night, he wrote this piece about vision. Vision is seeing the potential purpose hidden in the chaos of the moment. Vision is seeing the potential purpose hidden in the chaos of the moment, but which could bring to birth new possibilities for a person, a company, or a nation. Vision is seeing what life could be like while dealing with life as it is. Seeing what life could be like while living the daily toil. Vision deals with those deeper human intangibles that alone give ultimate purpose to life. In the end, vision must always deal with life's qualities, not its quantities. Vision must always deal with life's qualities, not its quantities. And that's something that we've been working with now as a kind of model of vision making in business and in other workshops and relationships and with different companies. And what we've found is there's this crucial step of vision is that it is not yet real, but could be. So it's finding the vision that is possible, even if it's unlikely, possible. And some of us may be tempted, I know I used to kind of shoot off into the impossible vision that can never be reality. I want to save the world, I want to feed the third world, whatever that might be. It's impossible. And the longer I keep feeding that vision, actually the less likely I am to do anything about it because it's impossible. So the important thing for me in a real vision is that it is potentially achievable, but it is not yet been achieved. And again, for me, Henry, in his quest to reunite England and France, that is there. It is difficult, it has not yet happened, but it is possible to achieve. And it will take a certain amount of courage and whatever to go through. The second thing we look at when we move on past the vision here is really about allocating resources and also assessing resources. For me, this happens in an interpersonal way as well as in an interpersonal way, looking at literally what kind of money and time we have available to put into a vision. There are also something that we've developed from a Jungian model, a model of what we call positive leadership potentials, which we, being theatrical types, base around 4 characters, which we call the warrior, the good king, the medicine woman, and the earth mother, or the great mother. And this is a post-Jungian model, which emerged from Newberg and has been refined by a guy called Gareth Hill in Berkeley and Robert Moore in Chicago. And we've kind of put a few little things on it ourselves here and there. And the idea is that any project and any meaningful thing starts in this place of change. Vision, imagination, change starts with the character, the archetype of the medicine woman, or the dynamic feminine. And if we're going to be successful leaders, we are going to need a bit of that imaginative, creative side. And one of the whole reasons I believe now there's a growing and fascinating dialogue between arts and business is that business can no longer survive without more of this vision involved in it. There's a whole now movement called arts-based training, of which we're probably now loosely a part, that is starting to meld these ideas, to be creative. Any new idea needs to be watered. Things don't arrive in this world, as James Hillman said, fully born. They need to be nurtured after birth and during the birthing process. So ideas need to be watered, as well as plants, as well as children in wombs. And projects and visions need watering. A vision will not arrive in the world fully formed and ready to be put into action. If it has been successfully watered, it can be born, it still then needs to be nurtured. And it moves into this realm of the static feminine, the character of the great mother, the holding principle, the building a relationship, building trust, whether it's with an idea with a group of people. Relationship building. When that has happened sufficiently, then an idea or a project is ready to be put into action. And then it moves up to this area, the dynamic masculine, the archetype of the warrior, where things are done. Things are acted, things are initiated, targets are met, lots of things happen. It tends to be very busy, very organized, very task-focused. But however, for something to complete, that's not the end. Once things have been put into action, they need structuring and appropriate order. And whether this is, again, a business or a community, there is then a need for an individual in a leadership role to submit to what is called the trial by fire, which is the submission to a greater authority. And they'll probably be familiar with the kind of archetype of like the RAF heroes who are great at running up and fighting planes, and eventually they're promoted till they get behind a desk, and then they get bored because they're actually looking after 100 planes, but they'd rather be up flying one. And that's the archetype of the hero or the warrior who is not submitted to the trial by fire, which is a submission to a greater authority. It is more responsible to manage 100 planes well than to fly one. But it sometimes appears more exciting to fly one. So this was the warrior moving into the position of good king to establish the order, the structure, the rules and regulations, the boundaries, the strategies, the finance, all those good things that a wonderful vision that's been appropriately nurtured and tried out can actually become repeatable, sustainable for its natural life cycle. And like all good things, eventually that life cycle, whether it's a project or a product or a particular pattern of being, will come to the end of its useful life, and then it has to go back down, cross the threshold that sometimes feels like a death, and be reborn or regenerated, revisioned in this process down here. So when we work with leaders, we will ask them, we do an exercise, which unfortunately we don't have time to do now, but we get them to act out these characters in different corners of the room, and we get all of the group to act out all 4 characters. And the idea is that they get to diagnose themselves as to which bits they're pretty good at and which bits they're not. Now being human beings, most of us are good at 1 or 2 characters, naturally. Around this model, and we have, those are our strengths, those are our positive resources. But most of us also have at least one blind spot. There's at least one thing on here we really don't like doing that much. And it might be really devoting the time to the inspiration, creating the space for imagination. It might be really nurturing and holding something, building a relationship with it. It might be putting it into action and having to stand up and fight for it, despite other people saying, I've got a better idea. Or it might be you've done all that, but actually you can't be bothered to put it into any kind of order or write about it or make it repeatable so other people can take it up if it's a good idea, and so it all kind of fritters away into nothing. So when we get on to dealing with the traitors, we say that the first traitors you have to deal with are the internal traitors. And there are 2 ways that the internal traitor can get in the way of your vision. One is that you simply don't have access to one of these areas. So people who have lots of wonderful ideas but try and put them straight into action see them fail time and time again. They haven't been held, they haven't been nurtured, they haven't been watered effectively enough. So if you have a blind spot in one of these areas, the projects will tend to get stuck in the area where that energy is needed. The other way the model works is that there is, of course, the thing of too much of a good thing. And if we tend to, like some actors, you'll notice a lot of actors get typecast, what we call. So you start playing a villain and you play it really well, and everyone says, oh, he's the villain type, and you end up playing a villain for the rest of your life. And we tend to be a little the same, particularly when we're managing our favorite projects. So what happens is we fall in love with our favorite character and we play it too much. And when we play it too much, we start to become destructive. The shadow side of that character comes out and actually eats away some of the energy that we actually need to move on into different areas. So, if we love the creative process, it may well be that as soon as we've come up with one genius, innovative way of saving the world, we think, oh, well, maybe I could come up with something better tomorrow. And we don't do anything with that. We simply reinvent the wheel every day. Or we might be able to get through the change and be able to get into the nurture, but then we fall in love with the nurturing. And we take care and build a relationship, whether it's with projects or people, to the exclusion of everything else. So we never like sometimes the archetype of the Italian mama or the Jewish mum who holds on to the kids too long or over-nurtures them. They don't get to fly the nest and go out and put things into action. And people, and some managers I've worked with can be like that too. You know, people are supposed to be doing a particular job or supposed to be doing something, and they come in 5 days in a row late, and on the 5th day, the over-nurturer will go up to them and say, is there something wrong? Would you like a cup of tea? Instead of giving them a kick up the arse because they've been late 5 times. Now, the others also have their shadow sides, of course, and the wonderful warrior who can go out and get things done and hunt and meet all his targets and achieve all these wonderful things in the world and usually win lots of medals doing it, often will forget to put away his sword. So he will come home into his house, oh, sorry, and 3 of his friends got their heads chopped off. He doesn't know when to stop fighting, brings the fight home all the time, tends to be very aggressive, even and maybe especially when people actually need a bit more caring or looking after. And the good kings, we've probably all had some experience of them, when they get in love with power. They want to hold on to the way things are, because that's the way things are done, and why change them now? They've worked for the last 3,000 years. And they become the bitter old men, the Senex, who hold on to what is, to the old structures, don't let new things emerge, and so on. So hopefully you get the idea. Each has its very positive potential, and if we overplay it, they also have their negative potential. And the idea, as in many things, is to find appropriate balance. If we just go back for a second to the model, you see that these are carefully color-coded, according to some Carnegie Mellon school of something or other. But anyway, I've attempted to show you on this map that in order for Henry to achieve his project, he also needs to use all 4 of those characters. To move into the imagination, to come up with the vision, you need that creative bit. To assess the past, to allocate resources effectively, you need the good king to give some structure and order. To actually get things done, you need to have the courage to deal with the traitors who stand in the way, and the courage to decide what the first steps are. There's 100 choices, you've got to decide on one. And also inspiring the troops, getting up, putting some energy, even when you maybe don't feel like it. Those are more the warrior tasks. And then the Earth Mother here, the dark night of the soul. How do you look after yourself in the midst of doubts, in the midst of crises, in the midst of things going wrong, and look after others effectively? And particularly, and most importantly, perhaps at the end, how do you turn the battlefield into a garden, become the gardener or the nurturer when you're used to going out and fighting? So this is where what we work with the allocating the resources and the dealing with the traitors. And then as we move into the kind of Act 3 and the first steps, one of the things that we would look at is very simply the power of words and the careful use of words. One of the things that tends to get very lost in our increasingly information-driven and technologically driven society is human contact with words. And when people in business ask me, how do you inspire people? I think the easiest reply is, well, you can't do it by email, which is what many people are actually trying to do. I've got a new vision for the company, email it to everyone, and surely it will happen. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. So you need words, and I would argue from Henry's point of view, you need images, and you need to be able to paint pictures of things that would be helpful. So when his troops get really stuck at Harfleur, this is how he talks to them. He's urging them on, and he asks them to go once more unto the breach, dear friends, once more, or close the wall up with our English dead. In peace, there's nothing so becomes a man as modest stillness and humility. But when the blast of war blows in our ears, then imitate the action of the tiger. Stiffen the sinews, summon up the blood, disguise fair nature with hard favoured rage. Then lend the eye a terrible aspect, let it pry through the portage of the head like the brass cannon. And he goes on and he tells them, do it for your mothers, do it for your fathers, do it for this, that and the other, do it for your country. But even in that little bit, we'll notice that the first thing that he's doing is including himself. When he calls people dear friends. And many people, when they're in a project, when they're trying to live a vision and it's not happening, separate themselves from the people they're working with. I've got this great idea, you're not doing it properly. And when we work with people whose job it is to rally the troops, to get groups of people, communities and workers motivated, they will almost always list the problems first. So if Henry was listing the problems first, he would go into his troops and he would say, now, You all know that we're 3 months behind schedule, and I'm sure you're aware that 20% of your friends are dead, and I'm sure it has not escaped your attention that the rest of you have got dysentery. This would not inspire his troops. But the human reaction is to focus on the problem. And Henry ignores the problem. And the question I believe he must have asked himself before he speaks is, how would they have to be in order to make the problem disappear? He doesn't tell them what they're doing wrong. He gives them a way of being that is going to help them succeed. And what he basically says is, act like tigers. That's what you need to do. At the moment, you're acting like pussycats. What I need you to do, act like tigers. We did an exercise, we did an experiment when we were rehearsing the play. And we asked all the actors to do a kind of active imagination exercise while Mark was doing his bit and reading the speech. We asked them all to do everything he was asking them to do. So they stiffened the sinews, summon up the blood, disguise fair nature, stiffen the teeth, do that, pry the portage through the head, the whole business. At the end of the speech, I turned to them and said, "How you doing?" And they just said, "Tell us where to go." They were all, right, just let us at him. Where are we going? It really worked. They put the images in their body, and it changed their state. It changed their state. Sometimes people have to know how to be rather than what to do. And sometimes you need to forget about the problems and focus on the way of being that will enable people to get to a more helpful solution. And that's how he gets through his first block. But the second block, he has to deal with a very different way. The first thing he has to do, being a leader, is be seen. One of the attributes of a good king is to be visible. One of the attributes of a leader is that they have to be seen, even if you're in a kind of rotating leadership, which is something that we're working towards promoting as a different management style. So it doesn't have to be one guy who's in charge all the time or one woman who's in charge all the time. You can actually shift leadership roles. But whoever is in the hot seat at that time needs to be seen. Visibility is a key to leadership. So even though he's facing the biggest battle of his life, he actually has to go round the troops. And the chorus, the fourth chorus, tells us what he's doing. It says, "Oh, now who will behold the royal captain of this ruined band? For forth he goes and visits all his host, bids them good morrow with a modest smile, calls them brother, friend, countryman. Upon his royal face there is no note how dread an army hath surrounded him. A largesse, universal like the sun, his liberal eye doth give to everyone, thawing cold fear." And I know Shakespeare kind of intuitively put in this thing, upon his royal face there is no note how dread an army hath surrounded him. Not on his human face. And this is where when we get into the use of theatre and acting in leadership, we say that sometimes a good leader needs to be a good actor. Because the first line of Act 4, he appears on stage alone with his brother, Gloucester. Having done all this bit, all the universal sun and all that stuff, he walks on stage with his brother, and the first line is, "Brother, 'tis true we are in great danger. The greater therefore should our courage be." 'Tis true we are in great danger. What he has to do as a leader is separate the royal face from the human face. But he has to acknowledge both. He can't go out to his troops and say, "Yeah, I think we're in great danger." Because, well, you know why. The alternative mistake would be to pretend that nothing's wrong to the troops and come in with your brothers and your mates and your mentors and your equals and pretend there's nothing wrong as well. "Oh no, this is going to be easy. Only 40,000 today, should be a piece of cake." Because no one will buy that either. And crucially for me, he doesn't lie. He doesn't lie to the troops. He simply meets them and is seen, calls them brother, friend, countryman. But do you, as a human being, want to be up all night, 3 o'clock in the morning before the biggest battle of your life, shaking people's hands who think they're going to die? I don't think so. But it's his job. It's the royal face of leadership that he puts on to meet that situation. Then he takes it off and he admits what's happening to his brother. Then Other people come in, all the nobles start sending him emails from all over the battlefield. We need a strategy meeting now, crisis. And Erpingham comes in and says, your nobles are all anxiously waiting for you in their tents. And he says, no. Tell them I will be a while. I and my bosom must debate a while, and then I would no other company. I and my bosom must debate a while, and then I would no other company. He'd take appropriate selfishness. I don't know about you, but often when I'm in the middle of a crisis situation, in some position of responsibility, everyone wants a piece of me, and all right, how can I help you? How can I, oh, you want something? Oh, you're pulled in so many different directions, you don't know what the center wants. And if you are in that position of leadership, if you are trying to hold a vision for people, you need to make that space to figure out, even in crisis, especially in crisis, what it is you're doing it for. And that's what he does. I and my bosom must debate a while. And he goes off and he makes some space for himself. He ends up talking, among other things, listening in disguise. He takes his crown off, puts a cloak around him, walks around the camp, bumps into a few people, ends up talking to 3 soldiers who are absolutely convinced they're going to die, and are also convinced, of course, it's going to be the king's fault. So he starts to get here that eternal thing. If you're in responsibility and something happens to me, it's your fault. Their projection, their blame on him. And he tries to argue, he makes a very simple point. He says that basically someone in a position of responsibility, what determines their responsibility for the outcome of an action is their intention going into it. So if I intend you harm, or he's speaking metaphor, if the king intends you harm by sending you in a battle, then he's responsible. But if the king is serving his realm by sending you in a battle and it needs to be done, he is not responsible personally, on a personal karmic level, for what happens to you. And actually, we don't have time to go into it now, but he kind of explains a version of the law of karma to them on the battlefield. He says every subject's duty is his king's, but every subject's soul is his own. He makes that distinction of where the responsibility, where the buck stops. But, like many people, he has actually heard and received the burden of other people's projections on him in that responsible position. They all think it's all on me, it's all on me. And he does this amazing thing. It's the first time he goes into soliloquy in the whole play, which is often in Shakespeare when you hear characters' true thoughts. Goes into soliloquy, and he gives a brilliant description of a brilliant whinge, basically. He does an absolutely archetypal whinge of the burden of leadership. And he's unloading. And at this point, he can't even unload on his brother. He unloads to himself, but he does express the feeling before he makes the decision. He doesn't carry the burden of leadership into that tent with him. So here he is doing his whinge. Where are we? Oh, there we go. Upon the king. So they've gone off and they've told him it's all his fault if anything goes on, anything goes wrong. And he says, they go off stage and he's left alone. He goes, upon the king, let us our lives, our souls, our debts, our careful wives, our children, and our sins lay on the king. We must bear all. O hard condition, twin-born with greatness, subject to the breath of every fool whose sense no more can feel but his own ringing. What infinite heart's ease must kings neglect that private men enjoy? What infinite heart's ease must leaders neglect that private men enjoy? What infinite heart's ease must people who hold a vision neglect that private men and women enjoy? There is a price to pay for holding a vision. There is a price to pay for leadership. It has to be managed, not pretending it isn't there. And he here is managing it. I feel this, I'm going to dump it. Thanks very much. Because if I go into the tent with this burden of leadership on my back, I could make the wrong decision. Is another layer that he's unpeeling, is the personal weight of responsibility. And then when he gets through, the last thing he does there after doing that is a prayer, a confession. And he says, O God of battles, let not the fear enter my men's hearts today. Let not the weight of the opposed numbers pluck their hearts from them. And then he makes this really interesting confession. He talks about his father's sins. His father's sin in killing a king. Richard II was running the country down. Henry Bolingbroke, Henry IV came in, took it over in service of the country, but ended up committing a crime. He killed the king. Henry, as his son, is now saying basically, please, let not the fault of my father come home to roost on me and my men today. And if you take that one stage further, he's owning what I call owning the shadow. In his family line, there is a tendency to be the mercenary tyrant. And in a very kind of archetypal way of making an interpretation here, he's saying, do not let this character rule me today. Please, oh God, keep me clear of that temptation. He owns the shadow. He looks right before he makes this decision at the bit of him that could come up and make the wrong decision. And he says, please, let me not do it from that egotistical place today. And then he goes off, and when he is able then to go in and face his nobles and his troops. And what he does when he comes in, of course, the nobles are now whinging. So the common soldiers have had a go, other people have had a go at him. The French have certainly had a go at him. Now the nobles are apparently losing their calm. And they're whinging too. And they're saying stuff like, fighting men, they have full 70,000. That's 5 to 1. Besides, they're all fresh. 'Tis a fearful odds. And then Westmoreland says, oh, that we now had here but 1/10,000 of those men in England that do no work today. The eternal plea whenever you're stuck in a crisis, more resources. If only we had more people, more money, more this, more that, we'd be all right. And the king comes in behind this and listens to it. He just overhears the end. Why we did it. He overheard the end. And he comes up to Westmoreland and said, what's he that wishes so? My cousin, Westmoreland. No, my fair cousin. If we are marked to die, we are enough to do our country loss. And if to live, the fewer men, the greater share of honour. By Jove, I am not covetous for gold. It yearns me not if men my garments wear. Such outward things dwell not in my desires. But if it be a sin to covet honour, then I am the most offending soul alive. No faith, my cousin, wish not a man from England. Rather proclaim it, Westmoreland, through my host, that he that hath no stomach for this fight, let him depart. His passport shall be made, and coins for convoy put into his purse. We would not die in that man's company that fears his fellowship to die with us. This day is called the Feast of Crispian. He that outlives this day and lives old age will stand a tiptoe when this day is named and rouse him at the name of Crispian. He that shall see this day and live old age will yearly on the vigil feast his neighbours and say, tomorrow is St. Crispian. Then will he strip his sleeve and show his scars and say, these wounds I had on Crispin's day. Old men forget, yet all shall be forgot, but he'll remember, with advantages, the feats he did that day. Then shall our names, familiar in his mouth as household words, be in their flowing cups freshly remembered. This story shall the good man teach his son, and Crispian shall ne'er go by from this day to the ending of the world. But we, in it, shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. For he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother. Be he ne'er so vile, this day shall gentle his condition. And gentlemen in England, now abed, shall think themselves accursed they were not here, and hold their manhoods cheap, whiles any speaks that fought with us upon St. Crispin's day. And then the marshal comes in and says, the French are ready to fight. He turns to Westmoreland, who says, perish the man whose mind is backward now. And the king says, thou dost not wish more help from England, cuz? Westmoreland says, God's will, my liege, would you and I alone without more help could fight this royal battle? King says, why, now thou hast unwished 5,000 men, which likes me better than to wish us one. You know your places, God be with you all. And they go off to fight. So he's turned them round in 45 lines completely. But what he's done, again, crucially, a few things he's done. First is, in the middle of the crisis, he's told them what he's doing it for. He's not saying, well, you should do this and you're paid to be here, so do it anyway. He says, listen, I'm not here for gold. I'm not here because I want to wear fancy clothes. I'm here because I think it's the honourable place to be. I believe it's the honourable place to do it. Then he says, and if you don't want to be here, don't be. I don't want to fight with people who don't want to fight with me. And I don't know about you, but I've been involved in many projects where there have been a lot of people hanging around who just really can't commit to the central vision. And you get twice as much done with half as many people when you've got the people who are actually committed to what is happening. And sometimes it's time to say, rather than we want everyone in, yes, one wants to be inclusive, and at certain times, that's it. Draw a line. You're in or you're out at this point of this particular vision, this particular project. Then what he does here is basically he gives them a future. Again, this thing of drawing, painting pictures of the future, he gives them a future. Everyone on that battlefield is thinking that in the next 2 hours, that's going to be them lying on the battlefield cutthroat. No chance of survival. What he does is he talks about a thing 30 years in the future. In 30 years' time, he doesn't say they're all going to survive. He says anyone who survives in 30 years' time will be in a pub on the eve of this day every year drinking to every one of us who didn't make it. And they'll be saying, that was one of the best days of my life. That was a battle worth fighting. That was a vision worth holding and fighting for and risking for. In those few moments, in 10 lines, he has suddenly given people a future. The gift of a future. Suddenly, everyone's thinking, well, I might be that one who's there in that pub. Yeah, well, that would be all right. It's a bit better than lying on the battlefield going, in the last few seconds. It's the gift. But because he creates that possibility in their minds, everyone begins to be able to mobilize their inspiration to fight for it. And then again, this thing of we few, we happy few. There is something about the band of brothers, the band of sisters, a band of a small community fighting for something it believes in. That creates tremendous energy if it's done in the right way. We don't want 100,000 people here. We can do this. And we can do it well. And that, again, it's a kind of energy, it's an image, it's a belief, but the belief is coming now from his core. Having stripped away during the dark night, he's able to speak from the place that he believes. And that's what for me, that's what makes the difference. And lest we think that there are only people in Shakespeare who can make a difference, I'd like to remind you, some of you may know this, of one of, for me, the great leaders of last century now, Nelson Mandela, who went through a dark night of the soul that was 27 years long. And he came out with a belief in the human capacity for positive change that, to me, is one of the most kind of inspiring statements I've heard, certainly in leadership. And this was a speech, a part of a speech that he gave in 1994 at his inauguration. And part of it is borrowed from a piece by Marianne Williamson, wrote a book called The Course of Miracles, and part of it's his. And this is what he said. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God, and your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We were born to make manifest the glory that is within us. It's not just in some of us. It's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. So that's a modern leader who I think in a different way lived through Henry's journey. Just to finish, it's also for me very important that it's not about everyone going out and saving the world. It's about everyone doing what they are called to do. And this sense, for me, the overriding sense of Henry is that he is in the line of service that he is supposed to be in. He has found his purpose and he's fulfilling it. Now, in his terms, yes, he was in charge of a country, but it doesn't need to be like that. Another American writer, Harry Emerson Fosdick, wrote this: the definition of a successful life, which we'll finish with. The definition of a successful life: to laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate beauty, to find the best in others, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition. To know that even one life has breathed easier because you have lived. So, okay. So thanks very much. We have a little time for questions and stuff. I think if we've got till about 5:30.
Decisions around who you actually work with, because when you talked about the person in McDonald's, it felt to me like that was more like shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic rather than actually making a difference. And talk about ethical leadership, but I was wondering if you look at other models of working, or whether I'm kind of concerned about you kind of promoting hierarchy and shuffling deck chairs.
Okay.
And whether you,
no, great question. Yeah. Yes, I refuse to work for British American Tobacco, and I would certainly consider. We've also decided not to work with certain people in defence departments. I personally didn't work with the guy from McDonald's, but in the open programs we get lots of people coming from different things, and I guess my belief is I would rather get inside the ship and try and make a difference than stand outside and say it's the wrong ship. So the thing is, as far as I'm concerned, where I've got to is big business is going to continue. It's not going to all go away because a certain number of people wish it. And I would rather try and make a difference to how it's going to be run in the future than complain about how it's run. So that's a personal choice. If I think that there's also something that I have to say I've changed over the last 3 years since I started working in business. Before I started, I had a real, what I would call, shadow projection on businessmen as being evil, manipulative bastards, basically. It was very simple, not at all judgmental. What I found was that they're basically exactly human beings like everyone else I've met and worked with, maybe with different pressures, maybe with different responsibilities, maybe with different choices that some of them have made in their lives. But that everyone has the possibility of being touched and of having their mind changed. And basically people don't come on our kind of courses unless they're open to change. But I do want to say that I'm seeing a lot of different signs, good positive signs. In fact, last week I went to a conference. It was a chief executives forum. It was headed by Microsoft and ICL. And these two top guys in England taken a day off work to promote the value of big business working with local community charities. And Microsoft had done it for the NSPCC, and ICL done it with an organisation called Youth at Risk. And they were there, basically they're getting a whole load of chief execs in, saying, listen, this has made a difference to us, it's made a difference to them, it's made a difference to our people. We now give our computers to the NSPCC, we train people how to run them. Our people who are stuck in head office now get 1 day every 6 weeks to go out and work with kids on the street and get to teach them how to work a computer. And they say, we believe this kind of initiative is making a difference. So there are ways in which people are beginning to take on the corporate responsibility is becoming, it's emergent. And personally, I'm very happy to be part of that in any way I can. What was the second bit? What was the...
I don't know, I was kind of thinking also about, it's very much to do with...
The hierarchy.
Yeah, the hierarchy.
Yeah. Well,
hierarchy rather than thinking about
I believe leadership is necessary to make change, but I believe that that can come from a group as well as from an individual. I believe, though, at a certain point, an individual needs to be in charge of making certain decisions. I believe in shifting leadership rather than consensus. Consensus around the decision, but I'd rather have one person make a decision. I've been involved in many projects where too many people have made a decision, and the level of vision has dropped to a lowest common denominator, rather than being held by one person who's really got the energy to do something. And just secondly, if I may, that more and more people are being asked to manage and lead incorporating the bottom half of this model, so that there are different structures of leadership. To be creative and to come up with the vision requires a more archetypally feminine energy. To build relationships and trust, both with a project and with your staff, actually is requiring a more archetypally feminine energy. 25 years ago, you could operate in business in the top half of the model, and you can't now. And people in the future, one of the things we do is attempt to teach these skills to people who are used to operating in the hierarchical way. So I think hierarchy has its place, and it's interesting to subvert it when we can. Yeah.
The model of Henry V as leader does bring out the warrior hero aspect. And I'm just wondering if you can point to another character in theatre that would embody a totally different notion of leadership. Well, not totally different, because it has to include those qualities, but a different emphasis. And I don't know, the child, or the point was just made that you could have a group that's taking responsibility, and the leadership passes around from one individual to another.
Yep, I mean, to me that's an emerging possibility that I'm personally interested in researching and pushing forward. I mean, I don't think it hasn't happened yet particularly. I mean, the one image we hold in some circles is the kind of round table, but with King Arthur being on a rotation system rather than in the seat all the time. And certainly in literature, as far as I know of, there aren't positive consensus leadership models as yet, and hopefully they will emerge. I mean, another character we work with in this work is Brutus, but we point out why, although he had the completely honourable position, why he failed was that he wasn't politically aware enough. So the honourable position and the integrity in leadership, for me, is the pillar, but you need other stuff on top to actually be successful with that. Yeah, definitely. There are some companies in America now that employ corporate fools. So they're allowed to sit on meetings and tell the CEO that he's talking rubbish and stuff.
Well, I used to teach political philosophy, and I was just thinking about Hitler and his vision, which is very, very powerful. And for me as well, what you were saying had got an immensely kind of masculine energy. I mean, I feel so moved by those speeches. I mean, they're so wonderful. And yet, there's part of me that feels enormous reservation about it, really. I was also thinking about The Tempest and Caliban, perhaps, as the shadow. I mean, that's a very different picture of, it's not really a leadership thing, but a different picture of a strong person there. Yeah. And also I was thinking about the Chinese view of the best leader is the one who doesn't even appear.
The servant leader.
The other people can do it. So I think it's dangerous to have just one model.
Absolutely.
There's so many elements, aren't there, in what we're all kind of wanting to do in our lives, really.
I mean, I think that's a great point, and the servant leadership is one of the things that we include in the leadership programs. This idea that the best leader is often the one who empowers and creates a space for others to move into. I think the point I was trying to make with Henry was more that for particular times in projects that you really care about, if one doesn't find a way to access the warrior energy, they will be killed by other people. And often when we work with people around the model, what happens is if we are in a particular position And if we, for instance, particularly enjoy being in the creative or the relationship position. The reason we don't move forward is that we fear if we move forward we will become the shadow of the next step. And actually, if I may say, with a lot of women that we work with who are coming up against a kind of glass ceiling in work which still exists, there is a fear of moving into the warrior because there is the real fear is that we'll turn into the mercenaries we hate. And actually what we say and what we coach these people, men as well as women, is you're the last person who will move into the shadow of the warrior because you're aware of it before you start. But sometimes the awareness of the shadow potential in a leadership style causes people not to enter into leadership at all. And so that's why basically the good guys don't make it to the top. Because they say, if I make it to the top, I'll become one of the bad guys.
They do. That's what they do, yes.
Yeah. So the other thing we've got to do is teach people to play politics. A lot of people don't succeed because with their visions because they're afraid of playing politics. They think politics is a dirty game. Well, the fact is it is a necessary game. Not to play politics with a vision or an organisation is a political act. Like not voting is a political act. Yeah, but yes, definitely the servant leadership, I would say, is a very high form of leadership. But sometimes to get a vision on the ground and up and running, you need a bit of the warrior as well. And like Henry at the end, if you stay addicted to it, you can't turn the battlefield into a garden. Yeah. Unfortunately, Shakespeare didn't get any mileage from writing about gardeners, so he gave us the warrior. Yeah.
Things have been coming to my mind at the moment about the situation happening between England and Ireland. Whether you could sort of put some archetypes on some of the characters. I'm thinking of how Molan got moved sideways and maybe the active feminine disappeared. And maybe whether some of your insight could actually move the circumstances on a bit.
Well, thank you very much, but the work we're doing in Ireland at the moment is we do peace retreats over in the borough and on the west coast, and we get groups of people together and actually try and focus on putting some peaceful energy into the land, and that's the activist bit of us at the moment, is focusing on trying to just start little pools of peace. And there is some great conflict resolution work going on. There's one guy I worked with at Findhorn last year called Colin Craig up in the Connemara community, who brings groups of Catholic and Protestant kids together who are used to throwing stones and shooting each other, and they live in a community for 3 weeks and do all these team building exercises and process and conflict resolution, and then go back out into the community. And that's the kind of work that I think the grassroots work is probably as important in the long run, perhaps more important than the political hobnobbing, but both have a place. Thank you. It's a good question. I mean, I believe that there are, I mean, although I don't think it's exclusive that the masculine styles are about men and feminine styles are about women, I believe that there is a balance and an increasing inclusivity around all four. That there is a tendency for the masculine style to be much more task-focused and the feminine style to be much more relationship-focused. And one of the things we do presentation courses as well based on this model, and we say you actually need to learn to speak to different people in different ways.
Well, what about a mixed audience?
Well, you can pitch it in the middle and separate them when you need to. I mean, it depends. It really, I mean, my guess is, my experience in speaking to groups of men is that men can be emotionally charged. I mean, the Henry V speeches you were talking about were two groups of men. So it may be something to do with the energy behind the message. That may not be quite in that way being delivered in a way that's communicating to them as clearly as it is to the women. But in my experience, men can definitely be motivated through speech and image and pictures. Yeah. Okay.
I'm sure there's loads more that people might want to ask and perhaps indeed talk about, but can we thank Richard very much, and please come and join us for a cup of tea and a chat and a piece of cake. But thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Positively.
All right. Thank you.